I'm going now to hand over to Ashley, who is going to talk you through some of the projects that he has been working on recently.
My slides. So I think I've just been unmuted. So hopefully you should be able to see me appearing at the top of your screen and see my slides in front. I'm Ashley Lodge. I am the Mindfulness Lead for Pearson UK, and I'm also a Senior Product Manager in UK schools. So I've been looking at kind of wellbeing products for schools in the UK, but I thought it would be good to give you an update about some of the mindfulness and wellbeing work we've been doing here for Pearson staff, just to explain how mindfulness has been working as an intervention for us in-house and why we believe in it so much, and then a bit more about wellbeing products that we're looking at currently developing. Okay, so there's two main areas we've been focusing in on Pearson UK, which I've already kind of alluded to. The first one is mindfulness as part of our wellbeing program for our Pearson UK staff. So I've been leading the program here for the last 2 years, and I kind of run a 6-week mindfulness course for staff. And we've had about, I think, between 550, 600 people come through the program over the last year or two. And it's very interesting, the kind of the statistics that I'm about to share with you are statistics that are all very much in line with all the academic research about how mindfulness can really help as an intervention in both the workplace and also in schools. So what we're seeing and the kind of data that's being reported back, we get all of the participants to kind of fill in a number of psychological questionnaires and surveys before the course and after the course, and then at a period of time after that. And what we're seeing is things like anxiety over the 6-week course is dropping down by at least 40%. We are seeing perceived stress levels dropping down by about 22%. And we are seeing focus and attention going up by about 22–23% over the 6-week period. So this is all kind of backing up the existing body of academic research that's out in the kind of the big wide world, all around how mindfulness interventions can really help people both reduce stress and anxiety and also help them deal with issues like depression, but also from a kind of learner and development point of view, how it can actually make us more resilient, how it can help influence and increase our kind of focus and attention, but also increase our memory too. And Amy will be talking a bit more about that when she gets into the nuts and bolts, how mindfulness can help with exam stress shortly. So that was the first part of what I wanted to share with what we've been doing here in-house with our Pearson UK staff. But in addition to that, I've also been leading on product development for UK schools currently. And we've been doing a range of things both around thought leadership. So I don't know if any of you ever come to big festivals that we have here, like the BET, the Education Technology Festival in January, the Schools Academies Trust we had the other month. I'm going to be at COBIS this coming weekend. And then finally, we've got the Festival of Education in June, where I've been working with colleagues and mental health charities, and we're going to be doing a thought leadership panel around that. But also from my research, I've been talking a lot to teachers and pupils about kind of the support they need. And what we're looking is developing some kind of whole school tools that allow people to get some kind of idea of the mental health and well-being of not only the pupils, but also the teachers, because teachers have said actually they want help and support with not just teaching mental health and well-being to their pupils, but for their own mental health and well-being. So I'm looking at working in partnership with a charity, and we will be announcing that in the next few months or so, around a product that we can be launching here in the UK, all around that kind of tool to help people get an understanding of what's going well, what requires improvement, and then putting in a plan that then we can look to see what can we do to help schools come up with various interventions, such as mindfulness, which is, we know, is a very good intervention for helping deal with stress and anxiety. And at the same time, what we've also done is create some content, and I know that Joanna will be sharing these with you later on. We've been sharing some content and creating content for our learners all around how we can support well-being during exam times. We've got a range of different posters up here. This is on our UK Schools and Colleges site. I know Joanna has got other links to the International Schools and Colleges site too. And we've created a whole range of different posters around how to set up your workspace, ways to revise, keeping motivated, staying healthy, and including mindfulness revision, which I penned myself. So lots of great stuff going on out there at the moment that is there and available for teachers in the UK, but also for our international colleagues too. So that was just a very little quick introduction from myself, just to kind of show you the kind of stuff that we are doing here in the UK that also might be made available internationally. So if you're interested, please do let Joanna know at the end of this webinar. We will be sharing all the links and slides from this. So I think that's my little quick intro as to what we're doing here in Pearson UK, both on our Pearson staff side, but also in product development for UK schools around thought leadership and that exam support material. So it's been great to work and do this intro. I've got to head off now, unfortunately, but Joanna will be keeping any she'll be keeping any questions for me and forwarding them on so I can get back to people later on. Okay, thank you, and back over to you, Joanna, and then on to Amy. Please do enjoy the rest of this fascinating webinar.
Thank you very much, Ashley. And just a word about the Pearson International Schools community, where we'll be uploading links to all of the resources that Ashley has just mentioned. Ashley is also a member of the community, so if you like, you can also contact him directly via the community, via the kind of the inbuilt messaging system there. So thank you very much once again, Ashley. It was really great to have you here, and we hope for further work and collaboration with you. And now I am going to hand over to Amy. I'm going to make her a presenter. And Amy, you are on.
Hello, everybody. I'm hoping that everybody can see and hear me, or maybe you can't see me yet. Just bear with me a moment. There I am. Hello. So lovely to see you all here today. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who were here last time, it's lovely to see you again. I'm so glad that your interest in mindfulness has continued to the extent that you'd like to find out more. And for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome, and I hope this is useful for you. So today we're going to be talking about mindfulness in practice. So previously we've done more of an overview of what mindfulness is in general and how you can think about starting to integrate it into the classroom as a general initiative. Today we're going to be looking more specifically at a very practical context around exams. Obviously, as Joanna pointed out, it's a very timely theme with exams coming up over the spring and summer months. So it's really great to have been invited here to talk about that with you. We're going to be looking at why it is that exams make us stressed in particular. We're going to be looking at going back over what mindfulness is for those of you who are new to it. And then we'll be looking at the effect of exam stress on the brain and how mindfulness can help us think more clearly and process information more clearly in an exam situation. And then we'll be having some practical activities and having a go at some meditations and seeing about how we can actively tackle the issue of exam stress using mindfulness. So let's have a look at why exams make us stressed. Well, I'd like to introduce you to our girl here who is sitting on her grass having a lovely afternoon. She's surrounded by trees and flowers and birds. And what all those things have in common is that they're real. They are real physical objects that she can smell, she can touch, she can see with her eyes. Her physical senses are able to verify that these things are real and around her. But what if I were to tell you that there were some other things around her as well that she can't see? There's a series of standards around her. Now, these are existing in her mind as an imagined reality. They're also existing in society as a collective imagined reality as well. Sensing what might be the best or the worst way to parent children, what might be an appropriate way to look or to dress for a particular context or culture. In terms of marital status, what's considered appropriate for somebody's age and position in society, whether they're happy or sad, their emotional and mental health state, as Ashley was talking about earlier. And so many things that as a society, whether we judge and criticize or not, there is an idea of placing people around us on some kind of common scale of what is deemed appropriate or common or the done thing. So this is all existing around her. But as you can see, it's not real. It is simply a social construct in the imagination. And when we put this into an exam situation, you'll see that obviously, of course, there are requirements of exams that sits on a scale as well. The scale of marking that somebody is expected to perform to. So our student here may have an ideal mark in mind. It's a set of criteria that he or she wants to meet, and that maybe, let's say, that's the top dot. And the bottom dot on our ruler there would be where the student either places themselves or is placed by the exam marker. And what's between those two is a sense of discrepancy, a sense of noticing where we want to be or believe we should be and where we actually are. And obviously where we actually are can be a perception as well. It can be a self-projected perception of what we think our ability is. So that discrepancy is something that we're aware of. And obviously in this context, we're looking at exam requirements, but that sense of discrepancy could be placed around all of those social constructs that we were just looking at. Now, what's interesting is what happens in the mind when we start to sense a discrepancy is that we have a little monitor in our mind that will always monitor and evaluate where we are in ourselves against a model or standard of where we think we should be. And as soon as that gets activated, it will find mismatches between how things are and how we think they should be. So our mind goes around in circles. It will look at the reality of a situation or the perceived reality, and it will compare that to how we think it should be. We'll then go back to the reality and check whether it's the same. And then we'll go back and check reality against how it should be. And then so on and so on. We ruminate, we go around in circles. And the problem is that the mind uses exactly the same system to try and fix that discrepancy as it does to go around in circles like that. And that's really tricky. It doesn't really help us at all, particularly in an exam situation. The result of this is that our thoughts can spiral, and we can get a sense of stress building up. We go into fight mode, flight mode, or freeze mode, which is a very primitive place designed to get us away from predators. Adrenaline and cortisol are two hormones that get released into our system, and it shuts down anything that we don't need to use. Because if we're running away from a predator, why would we need to use our memory? Why would we need to use creative language? So all of these skills that we need for an exam situation get shut down. And the beautiful thing is that mindfulness can actively help us shift out of this mindset. So by looking specifically at what the problem is with stress, what is it that takes us to a stressed state? By looking at this, we can start to see how mindfulness can actively shift us out of that. So we'll look at that a little bit later on. First of all, let's have a look at actually what mindfulness is. Now, some of you may be more familiar with this than others, But I just wanted you to get an idea, just ask yourselves what you think mindfulness is. Some of you may assume that it looks something like this. There's a chap, he's sitting with his legs around his head almost, in what looked like not necessarily that comfortable a position, sitting on a rock by a river. And yes, he looks very peaceful. This might be what people traditionally would assume that meditation and mindfulness have to look like. But the thing is, it doesn't really. It doesn't need to be that complicated. Because yes, he's got this chap has this position. He looks like our typical view of mindfulness. But mindfulness refers not to that position of sitting and meditating, and not to that position that he's taking up with his body. Mindfulness refers to the awareness that comes from focusing on the present moment, without judgment, with objectivity, with conscious focus, and with compassion. So we can't tell. This chap might be thinking about his lunch, in which case he's not being mindful at all. He's off in a ruminating, thinking space in the mind rather than focusing on the present moment. So really, we need to, in a way, break the stigma really around what mindfulness is and can be, because it can be simple as focusing on the present moment and seeing what awareness comes from that in the mind. We don't need to be next to a river, on a rock, sitting cross-legged in our hands in prayer. We can do it just sitting in our chair, and that's a beautiful thing. So I thought, on that note, let's have a go and see how you find it. If you don't want to have a go, that's absolutely fine. Just stay with us, have a cup of tea, and join us in a few moments when we've finished. For those of you who'd like to have a go, we can do it right here at our desks or wherever you're standing or sitting. So take a moment to get yourself comfortable. If you're sitting on a chair, just really get yourself comfortable. Put your feet flat against the floor, perhaps have your hands resting on your lap, and draw yourself up a little bit tall so you're relaxed but active. And if you're standing up, perhaps see if you can focus on the weight of your feet on the floor and really just have a moment where you can stand quietly for a moment. And if you feel comfortable to do so, let's close the eyes. If that feels a bit funny, if you feel dizzy or you feel a bit uncomfortable doing that for whatever reason, feel free just to keep the eyes open and just have a soft gaze in front of you instead. So for the time being, let's close the eyes if you'd like to. And just take a few deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Just notice, observe what happens to the body and the mind when we try that. Perhaps you feel a bit lighter as you breathe in and a bit softer as you breathe out, or a bit heavier against the chair or floor. Allowing the breath to return to a natural rhythm for you, in through the nose and out again. And just like a feather floating down through the air and resting on the ground, allow your attention to float down to the base of the spine, resting against the chair. And allow the attention to rest on the contact that the base of the spine and the legs are making with the chair, that your feet are making with the floor. Notice the weight, the contact, what that feels like physically. Noticing that the mind does and will wander. You can allow it to wander, but as soon as you realize that it has, gently guiding the attention back to focus on your weight against the chair. Focus on this present moment. Try not to force or criticize yourself for the mind wandering, knowing that that's normal and okay. Just guiding it back gently as soon as you notice and carrying on. Perhaps growing aware of the sounds around you in the room now. Allowing them simply to be around you in space. Noticing if you want to make an attachment to the sounds or label them. And knowing that you don't need to do this, you can simply allow the sounds to be around us in the air. As we stay focused on the breath. Increasing that focus on the breath now, floating the attention in, to focus on the air going in at the tip of the nostrils, and out again. And noticing the sensation of each breath going in and out. Again, not forcing it, simply allowing it to come in and out and noticing wherever you feel it the most. Noticing how each breath is unique to each moment. Each one is different. And counting 10 breaths to yourself like this. And whenever you reach the 10th breath, simply allow the mind to go free for a moment. To think whatever it wants to think. Before bringing the attention back in to the breath. Deepening the breath a little. Noticing the sounds around you in the room. Noticing your weight against the chair. And noticing how you feel for a moment. Notice how your mind feels. Notice how your body feels. And gently open the eyes and come back. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you found that enjoyable, and I'd love to hear about your experiences. Perhaps you could let Joanna know in the chat box, and she can fill me in later. I'd love to hear more. So as we've seen there, mindfulness is the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to things as they are. So just like we were watching the sounds there, we were watching the breath, we were watching the physical sensations, what we're aiming for is almost a witness state, able to look at the present moment as if a beginner, as if we've never seen it before, without an emotional attachment to it, simply observing what's happening, both with our thoughts and feelings and bodily sensations. And that awareness that emerges is really, really helpful and valuable in allowing us to notice what's going on in our thought habits and in our reactions to situations. So taking that context, let's have a look at exam stress and the brain. I want to take you on a little journey back to about 70 million years ago, okay, in our time machine. And here we are with our caveman, excuse my art, and I wouldn't really call it art actually, but there you go, maybe it'll become famous one day. Here's our caveman, and he's there with his predator in front of him. For illustrative purposes, it's a lion, but perhaps more accurate would be a saber-toothed tiger. Insert whichever predator you'd like. And what we can see here is that really all he is concerned with is fighting off that predator. So the brain of our chap here is really only capable of noticing a predator in front of them and allowing, and his body will react to that. If the lion or the saber-toothed tiger wasn't there, then they wouldn't have a reaction to it. There'd be no awareness of it. What happened, what we believe happened around about this time, obviously it took hundreds and thousands of years, but within the context of a relatively short space of time, is we evolved a little bit in our brains, and we evolved to be able to think and plan and to believe in things that didn't exist. Now, why this was important is because it meant that not only could we believe in, could we see a predator in front of us, our body would also react in fight or flight to the thought of a lion or a saber-toothed tiger, a predator, who might be nearby. Perhaps they're at the watering hole. If they hear about it from a neighbouring tribe or members of their tribe, they would be able to react their body would be able to keep them safe from that predator, because the imagined thought of it is a bit hard to imagine, not being able to imagine, not to be able to believe in things and picture things that didn't exist, that weren't in front of us. But that was a really valuable survival tool, known as part of the cognitive revolution, and it really did change things in a big way, and there are remnants of this today. Because also what that happened at that time was we not only became able to imagine things on our own as individuals, but we also became able to imagine things as a group, as a collective. So we became, as a group, we could be aware of the concept of a predator. That wasn't in the same place, but you could tell somebody about your thought about it, and it would also begin to exist in their mind as well. What also this allowed us to do was to get a sense of the ability to gossip, really, the ability to know who was making a good contribution to the tribe. So getting a sense of who was strong enough, who was contributing to food, who was looking after the children, who was a decent kind of person that was known to be a good member of the group. And that was really the first seed of a measuring stick of social acceptability. And what this meant was that it was just the start of that ability for people to fall short of social expectation. Obviously, it was much more primitive than what those words mean now, but it was the real start of the seed of that. And it meant that if somebody was isolated from the group, it was a real threat to survival, because isolation was very dangerous. It meant that there was no share of the food, and it also meant that there was no protection from predators, so you're on your own and easily picked out. So you can see how actually that sense of falling short of societal expectations really started to link directly with survival. So we were able to not only imagine, and our mind was able to react to the threat of a predator, our mind and our body was also able to react to the threat of isolation, to not being a part of society, so a more emotional imagined reality. Let's fast forward back to the present day, and the unfortunate position that we're in is that our mind and our brain and our body, will now associate an exam situation with a predator. And so our body reacts in exactly the same way, which isn't very helpful at all. There's a bit of a mismatch here, as you can see. Our predator, let's look at I did a little matrix here of the skills that you might need to get away from a predator and the skills that you might need to perform well in an exam. As you can see, there's a bit that doesn't quite match up. So if you're being chased and by a particularly savage mammal, you need to be able to run away fast. You don't need to do that in an exam. You need to be able to fight. You definitely don't need to be able to do that in an exam. I think that goes against the guidelines for the exam conditions. You don't need to be able to breathe deeply when you're running away. You just need that shallow breath that gives you enough oxygen to get away. You don't need to remember any information, you just need to see where you're going and get away. You don't need to speak in sentences, you just need to holler. You don't need to think creatively, and you won't have time to write anything down, so why would you need to do that? Those are all skills that you definitely need to perform in an exam situation, so you can see the problem here. There is one thing that's in common though, and that is it's very helpful to have the ability to focus clearly on a goal. So, you know, that sweet spot that comes when adrenaline kicks in and you think really clearly. They always say that a few nerves can be helpful. And what this means is, yes, there's that clear thinking that comes with adrenaline, but and that can be really helpful in an exam situation, that clear focus. If that stress, if that adrenaline and cortisol hits a level that's too high, then it starts to shut down all those useful functions that we need, and that's why we have a bit of a problem. So we're really looking for that sweet spot where we can use the adrenaline to our advantage. What researchers have also found out, interestingly, is it's not just that situation in the exam where your memory and your ability to complete a task is effective. They've also noticed that chronically high stress levels over time can also impair your ability to form new memories. So if a student is really stressed for the entirety of their exam term, then it's really going to have an effect on their ability to form the exam in the first place, because they're not able to take on new information. They're not able to form memories of the content that they're learning, or and if it's a language exam, develop new language in the brain. So it really could affect the final performance, and that's why we're going to talk about a plan for integrating mindfulness and exam stress management early on through the term, as well as an SOS situation in the exam itself. Let's have a look at how mindfulness can help. Well, hopefully now we've gone back to basics a little bit. We've gone right back to the seed of when this sense of threat around societal expectations and exams started to form. So if we go back to basics again, essentially what that came down to at that point was we started to believe in things that weren't real. So what mindfulness can do is take us out of that space where we are focusing on what isn't real, and it brings us back to the present moment of what is real. And when I talk about real, I mean physically. It can be physically sensed, it can be touched, felt, smelt, seen, heard, okay? And all the things that are imagined, like I need to get a certain mark in my exam, I need to remember that piece of information, I need to get to university, all of that stuff, that is a societal construct, it's in the mind. And so we're talking about bringing it back into the body, into the physical senses. And that's where mindfulness is really helpful, because what researchers have found is that actually it's really difficult for the brain to do both things at once. It can't be in the network, activating that ruminating network that we looked at earlier, at the same time as physically sensing the present moment, like we were doing earlier with our feet on the floor. Okay, so that's why it's really, really important to be able to slip out, notice when we're in that mode in the first place, and slip out of it and into the present moment. What this does is it actively deactivates stress mode. The very act of breathing, like we were doing earlier, will activate rest or digest, which is the antithesis to fight or flight mode. It's known as the parasympathetic nervous system, which is where all the stuff, like a bit like in our matrix that we were just looking at, all the stuff that we don't need when we're fighting a predator comes into, can start acting again, like the ability to go to sleep and rest, the ability to digest our food, and then all the other benefits that we're looking at, all the other secondary functions. It also means that the discrepancy monitor can't really work at the same time, as we were saying. It's a different network in the brain. It also improves concentration and focus, because the very act of focusing on a physical anchor in the present moment trains our mind to use those bits of the brain that are good at focusing, that are good at concentrating. And the more we use our brain in certain ways, the more it builds up neural connections in that area, and it becomes better at it. So just the very act of focusing on the breath, or focusing on bits of the body, that can help us in other ways and build our ability to focus in lessons and in an exam situation. And also that objectivity that we were talking about allows us to be more compassionate towards ourselves. It allows us to notice when we're being critical and shift that into a kinder mindset. So there's a lot we can do around that as well. So a meditation practice, let's look at a two-prong approach. The first, as we were looking at, was practicing over a period of time, so perhaps 5 minutes at the start of a lesson. We'll look at that in a moment, a little bit more on that. But preparing for the exam season during the term, using a practice a bit like the one we were doing just a few moments ago, and using that regularly so that students start to become used to what that space in the present moment feels like, and their brain gets used to flipping back into that much more easily. It's like going to the gym and building up muscles. You know, when you first start, if you went straight into an exam and you're expected to lift a 20-kilogram weight without having done any weight training, we wouldn't expect our arms and our strength and our shoulders to be able to do that. So why do we expect our minds to be able to cope with a threatening situation like that without preparing it to deal with that and familiarize with it? So that's why doing a bit of work during the term can be really, really beneficial. What I'd like to show you now is also an SOS practice for right before or even in the exam, which is a slightly different technique. And we'd use that when, you know, that moment when the heart is racing, mind goes blank, all you can think about is writing your name or writing out the question. So using meditation, using our breath to actively calm us down, to take us out of fight or flight and into rest or digest and that creative thinking space. So let's have a go and I'll show you what I mean. Okay. So let's find that position that we had previously, sitting tall on your chair or just standing quietly if you're standing up. And taking a few deep breaths in through the nose, closing the eyes, of course, if that feels comfortable, or just gazing down at the space in front of you if necessary. Big breath in and sighing out through the mouth. And just allowing the mind to observe the effect on the muscles. Observe the effect of each breath on the body. Notice how on the in-breath we might lift and lighten a bit. And on the breath out we may soften down. Noticing our feet against the floor and giving a little wriggle with the toes, really starting to sense the physical sensation of the toes moving, the toes against the floor. And now taking the attention to the breath and using a count of each breath to focus your attention, we're going to actively slow down the breath. Breathing in at the nose for 1, 2, 3, 4, and out for 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing in slowly, not forcing it, for 1, 2, 3, 4. And out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in for 1, 2, 3, 4. And out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And take another big deep breath in and sigh it out through the mouth. Notice the weight of your body against the floor. Notice how your mind feels in your body. And gently open the eyes. So you can see there that we tried something a little different. Okay, we tried really slowing down the breath out. And why that's really helpful is that allows the body to decrease the heart rate. So when we increase the amount of time that we're breathing out, very, very gently without forcing it, it slows down the heart and it activates that parasympathetic nervous system that we were talking about. So in that moment of real panic in an exam, it can take us out of fight or flight. And once we've calmed down a bit, perhaps you can start to employ some of those other practices, like just following the breath for a few moments, whatever's needed. You see that it's a slightly different practice there, but one that's really, really valuable. Let's have a quick look at how we can then integrate that into the classroom. So developing, as we've just said, the real value of developing a mindfulness or centering practice from the word go at the start of the lesson, at the start of the course. So that might be just 5 minutes of breathing in the lesson, just sitting at desks without any fuss, and some home practice as well. There are lots of resources that I provided to Joanna and the international schools community on the community forum, and obviously there's the materials that Ashley was talking about earlier that you can use, but there's also a wealth of free resources available, open source resources that you can find if you want to provide a breathing exercise for all your students to follow in the lesson. It's also important to try and practice at home as well, because the more they can practice, the more they'll build up those neural connections in the brain, and it can really help with allowing information to sink in during revision as well. We'd also like to try and look at how we can stop the exam feeling like a threat. So first things first is reducing the opportunity for the mind to create a discrepancy mode around the exam. And there's a real power in that situation in the word yet, because what the word yet does is bring us into a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. So if you imagine that we're on that little ruler that we were looking at earlier, and we've got an idea of where we need to get to, and then we look at where we are, and we look at where we need to get to, and if you say, I can't do that, there's a real finality about that. There's a real sense of, oh, well, I can't, I'm never going to be able to get there. And that discrepancy becomes really acute and really obvious. If you say, I can't do it yet, then the sense of that discrepancy loses a bit of power, don't you think? It makes it easier just to know that, well, maybe not right now, but I will get there. And so encouraging the use of that word in the classroom with your students and the feedback you give them can be really, really valuable in helping reduce in helping just shift their attitude towards that exam situation. And in terms of reducing perceived danger, we can have regular low pressure progress checks so that sense of discrepancy is more easily managed, but also using whatever control you have over the exam conditions that your students are going to be in to familiarise them with it, to make that exam seem like a safe space. Obviously, the first time we see something, as we saw earlier, we're going to be stressed about it because we don't know what to expect. But if we feel that it's a safe space, then our body won't react as if it's a predator. It won't react like it's a threat. So anything that you can do, and obviously that will be different depending on your context of what exam they're taking, what country and system you're working in, but anything like that could be really, really helpful. So let's have a little look at what that mindfulness bit might look like. Some of you might have seen this the first time round. I just wanted to go back over that again. And as we saw, being on chairs at desks is absolutely fine for practicing some breathing. All you need to do is encourage some quiet. It's great to do it at the start of the session, because I think you'll find that the students will be much more focused for the rest of the session, and just those few minutes will allow their attention on the content you need to teach to be much clearer and much more attentive. The practice itself can simply be a breath counting meditation like we were doing earlier, and I've mentioned a couple of the places that we can find some resources for that. And that could be a recording that you play for them, or you may feel confident enough to write something to read out, or find a script online somewhere. And another point is about inquiry at the end. So it doesn't need to be anything complicated. It's simply involving a discussion with the class, asking them, what did you notice about your experience? What have you noticed about your feelings? And perhaps encourage them to note those observations down in a journal so they can keep track of them a little bit. But just, you don't need to have any answers. Just giving them an opportunity to share their experiences and to share them with each other is so valuable, because it can help them see that everybody's in the same boat, really. So that's all we're going to be talking about today. I'd love to hear some of your questions and comments on your experiences of the meditation as well. So I'd love to hand back to Joanna, and she can take us through that. Thank you so much for being there today.
Thank you so much, Amy. We've had a few questions already, and some of them were comments very similar to the morning session. A lot of very relaxed participants after the meditation session at the beginning. And in fact, I think we've got quite a few more participants who are perhaps somewhere in the Far East, and the time there is almost midnight. So they were a little worried that they might nod off, but I hope they stayed with us. Another comment about the breathing SOS. Someone saying that a great pearl of intervention that they will definitely share with their students. And then a couple of questions that are specific to actually working with students and asking how to make it really work for students. So the first question is, do you have any tips on presenting all of this really important information to students so that they also feel that it's worth it?
Hello, hi, I'm here now. That's a really great question. And presenting, getting the buy-in of the students is really important, as you're quite right to touch on. I think you've seen here really that perhaps the best way is just to try it, and you can present some of the benefits to them. But quite often, if we're thinking about what we want an experience to be like, what an experience should be like, then in a way, if you think about it, we're kind of in that discrepancy, ruminating space again. So rather than say, this is what you need to feel with mindfulness, this is what we're trying to get to, just try it with them. Say, we're going to try something new. We're going to just try some techniques to help with preparing your mindset for the exam, just to help with some focus before we get going, and just ask them to try it and see how they feel. And if they and explore, as we were saying, in that inquiry mode, so explore what their experiences were like, what they might have noticed. Keep a bit of consistency around it as well. Perhaps try it for a couple of weeks and see if they start to notice a difference in how they're feeling and how they find the experience. Particularly with younger children, they really do find routine helpful. I'm working with a primary school at the moment, and they're quite a lively little class, and actually over the weeks they've started to get used to that routine, and you can see that they're starting to feel more comfortable with what's expected of them, and they're starting to notice some of the benefits of just sitting and listening and breathing. So yeah, I would really advocate just trying it with them, just having an experiment. There's a lot of research around here. You can use some of the information from this webinar to present to the students as well, if you feel that they'd need a bit more information before they have a go. Also, there's a lot of celebrities that do it as well. If that's something that would motivate students, then find their favourite celebrity and show that they do it.
I think that is probably the best tip. You mentioned younger students a few times, and I think we have quite a number of preschool teachers and primary teachers. Do you have any tips for preschool kids? How do you practice mindfulness with very young children?
That's a lovely question. I have a preschooler myself, so and it's one of her classes that I've been working with as well. So this is very fresh in my mind. With the little ones, it's keep it short. So we were probably meditating for about 5 minutes there. I think even for the little ones, that's probably the maximum to try. There's also different activities you can do. All we're doing is focusing on the present moment, on the physical anchor in the present moment. So if using things that keep their focus. So it might be having their hands on their tummy is a really nice thing, and watching their hands go in and out. You could even use a teddy, that's really nice. So popping a teddy on their tummy, playing some nice music, getting them to lie down or sit in a circle, and notice their teddy going in and out or up and down with their breath. So using something that really focuses their attention. Another nice thing for little ones as well is to make glitter jars. So taking a jar or a bottle of water and putting glitter in it, and then screwing the lid on, shaking it up, and then just watching it settle whilst listening to some nice music. So that can be a really nice way to get them to focus. And it's essentially tapping into the same network in the brain, but you're not expecting them to sit in silence for a long time. So anything like that you can do to make it a bit more tangible is really helpful.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question, which is relating to the practice and sort of getting buy-in from students. Do you think that telling students explicitly about the goal of breathing, the relaxation that you're aiming to achieve, do you think that would help them do it better?
Yeah, I think yes. I think you're right that can help if you're saying this is going to help with stress. That can be really helpful to have a goal and intention in mind. I think trying to explain too much about how they should feel is something that might be best explored through experience. When I'm delivering my 8-week programs, I find it quite helpful to leave some of the theory until, say, week 4, when everyone who's on the course has really started to experience some of that effect and awareness themselves, so and you can apply the theory on top. So having explaining that yes, you can, this will really help reduce stress and help you think a bit more clearly and keep you calm during the exam. That's great. Just not going into too much of the detail about what they should or shouldn't be feeling at any one time, and just allowing that to come out through their own experience.
Okay, and another question, not my words, but what to do about naughty boys who are not taking it seriously and disrupting the whole group?
That's a really good question as well, and something that unfortunately we all probably have to deal with. The key really is not to make it a chore. I think the moment it seems like at the moment it starts to seem like it's a forced activity, is when you might lose some of those students, and they don't need any more forced activities along with exams. So you can use a technique which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, called voluntary exclusion, where you can, if someone is really disrupting the group, just take them aside or address them quietly in the group and explain that their behaviour is meaning that others can't take part. So they're very welcome to stay in the group and do it and join in and do it quietly. But if they don't feel they're able to do that, they can go and sit over in another area of the room and sit quietly. And then when they're ready to come back and join in, they'd be very welcome to come back. And once they come back in, just don't make any reference to it, just welcome them back in and carry on, so that you can let them see that actually it's their choice whether they take part or not, but those who are taking part are going to take part seriously. And again, you might find that with regular consistent practice that they start to get used to how it's going to be. If it's a particularly big group, you're finding that the numbers and the disruption just isn't working for your dynamic in your school, there's nothing to say that it can't work really nicely with a big group. But if that's not working for you, then maybe look at small breakout times if that works in your timetable, where you take them in small groups, maybe before or after school, whatever works, or at break times. But you know your timetable, so you'll know what works best for you. But don't be put off if you only have, if you can't break out and you only have a big room, give it a go, see what happens.
Okay, and I think we probably have time for just one more question for you, and that is, are there any other types of mindful practices which do not involve meditation?
That is a really, really lovely question. Thank you for whoever sent that in. So one of the things I perhaps didn't say in this particular webinar was that meditation is just a vehicle to mindfulness. So mindfulness doesn't only have to be accessed through meditation. Obviously, it's a really nice way of doing it. It's really accessible, and it uses the breath, which is always with us and has all those benefits around fight or flight. But we can still focus ourselves in on the present moment in a variety of other ways. So mindful walking is a lovely thing to do. So really, so like we were using our focus on the feet at the start of our meditation practice today, you can use that focus on the feet when you're, say, standing outside or walking around the classroom, and really start to notice what the feeling of your feet on the floor feels like and what it starts to feel like as you are walking, what those movements feel like, and start to notice what's around you if you're outside in the world around you, what's around you in the classroom, and just using, instead of the breath, using the walking motion as your anchor. Mindful eating can be really nice, eating a piece of fruit really slowly, or a nut or a little snack really, really slowly, savouring each bite, really noticing the flavours, noticing the smell. That's another thing. So anything that takes you into your physical senses can be used to bring that awareness.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much. We don't have time for any more questions for Amy. If I can just wrap up by saying that the recording of the webinar, both as a clip that you can watch and also download, will be available on Pearson International Schools community within the next couple of days. We will also send you a follow-up email that will have links to all of the resources and also those resources, those posters that Ashley talked about at the beginning of the session. So you will definitely get links to all of those resources. And someone asked, what if I haven't registered for this webinar? I'm just watching it for someone. Then once again, if you go to Pearson International Schools community and register, you can also download those resources. Without registering, you can also read at least 4 or 5 blog posts that Amy wrote for us over the course of the last 6 months, which I think would be really, really useful and interesting. Yeah, so thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to Amy, thank you to Ashley, who had to leave us early, but it was really great to get a taster of what's coming from that team as well. I wish you all a lovely day, if that's where you are, a nice afternoon, or good night if what you've been doing for the last 60 minutes was trying not to nod off. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you in another webinar for Pearson International Schools very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.